Cold air rested over the quiet stretch of highway like a held breath, the kind that makes even the smallest sound travel farther than it should. Red and blue light moved slowly across empty asphalt from a single patrol car angled near the shoulder. The colors did not feel urgent. They felt patient, almost calm in a way that made the night more unsettling instead of safe. Beyond, the glow-dry winter grass leaned under a soft wind. Miles of open farmland stretched into darkness where no houses showed light and no passing engines broke the silence. Several minutes went by with nothing moving at all. Only the faint ticking sound of hot metal cooling somewhere out of sight. Inside a thin boundary of yellow tape, a portable floodlight hummed with a steady electric whisper. Its pale white beam created a small circle of brightness that looked fragile against the endless dark around it. Anything outside that circle felt distant already, like memory fading before it could fully form. Standing near the center of that light was Dr. Elian Vera, hands deep inside the pockets of a worn field coat, shoulders slightly bent forward as if the quiet itself had weight. Elian did not look dramatic or heroic. No sharp gestures, no raised voice, only stillness and attention. Stillness had followed Elian for years. It had grown slowly through long nights in silent laboratories and colder nights at scenes where truth arrived too late to save anyone. Most people learned to forget what they witnessed in this work. Elian remembered everything. Not by choice, just by nature. Tonight the stillness felt heavier, because something about this place refused to feel ordinary. An abandoned sedan rested at a shallow angle in the ditch beside the road. Its front end showed damage, yet not enough damage. Broken glass lay scattered across frozen dirt in a pattern too neat to be random. Even the silence felt arranged rather than natural, like a stage waiting after the actors had already left. A county deputy shifted weight nearby boots pressing softly into gravel. The voice came low, careful not to disturb the quiet more than necessary. "You ready to take a look?" Elian gave a small single nod. No extra movement. No spoken reply. Words were often unnecessary at the beginning of a scene. Listening mattered more. The temporary evidence tent stood beside the vehicle, pale and thin against the dark fields. Inside, the air carried the faint smell of plastic sheeting and cold metal tools. The body had been removed hours earlier. Only absence remained. Absence could feel louder than presence, especially when a life had ended without explanation. Elian moved slowly along the edge of the tent, eyes tracing every inch of ground, searching not for what was obvious, but for what tried to remain unseen. Years earlier, a mentor had said that crime scenes whisper before they speak. Most investigators never learn how to hear the whisper. Elian had learned, and sometimes wished that had never happened, because whispers rarely carried comfort. Near the rear tire, a small numbered marker flag stood in the dirt. 7. Beside it, a thin smear almost invisible against the dark rubber surface. Not blood. Not oil. Something lighter. Something wrong in a quiet, careful way. Elian crouched down slowly, knees meeting frozen soil without hesitation. Gloved fingers hovered just above the faint mark, never touching, never rushing. Observation first. Always observation. The deputy watched from a respectful distance. Everyone in the county had heard stories about the quiet forensic specialist from the state laboratory. The one who solved cases others abandoned. The one who disappeared again once truth surfaced. Some people called it brilliance. Some called it obsession. A few called it grief. No one asked directly, because Elian's eyes always reflected distance, like someone watching a memory no one else could see. The smear near the tire caught angled light and shimmered faintly. Not fully dry. Not liquid either. Unfamiliar. Elian rose slowly, turning toward the dark farmland beyond the ditch. Nothing moved there. Yet the uneasy feeling remained. A sense that the story told by this place was incomplete. And incomplete stories were dangerous. They invited the wrong ending. Farther down the road, new flashing lights approached, growing brighter before stopping behind the patrol car. A tall figure stepped out, coat collar turned against the cold air. Investigator Corvin Hale. Corvin carried tension the way some people carried fatigue. Visible even in silence. He trusted instinct more than patience. Yet difficult cases kept placing him beside Elian again and again. Single vehicle crash is what we were told. Corvin spoke quietly, eyes scanning the ditch. A short pause followed. Does not feel like one. Elian kept looking into darkness for another moment before answering. No. Only that single word. But it carried certainty without force. Corvin released a slow breath, disappointment mixing with expectation. Victim identified about an hour ago. Name is Leora Dane. The name settled into the cold night with quiet weight. Even the deputy looked up slightly in recognition. Leora Dane had lived here. Taught at the small public middle school. Helped organize weekend food drives. The kind of person neighbors described as steady and kind. The kind of loss that moved through a community like silent weather. Elian closed eyes briefly in acknowledgement. Every investigation began with a name. And a name made everything real. When was she last seen? The question came soft and level. School fundraiser this evening. Left around 9:30. Never made it home. Wind moved again through dry grass, creating a faint rustling that almost sounded like distant voices. Elian looked back toward the damaged sedan. Headlights shattered. Front metal bent. But still not enough. Not enough to explain death. Something else had happened here. Something careful. Something hidden inside ordinary appearance. Corvin studied Elian, searching for the moment when silent observation turned into direction. You see something already. A long pause rested between them. Maybe. Not confidence. Not doubt. Only possibility. County wants answers fast. Family even more. Quick answers rarely match true ones. Elian said nothing. Instead stepping closer to the open driver's side door. Inside, the weak interior light spread a dull yellow glow across an empty seat. A paper coffee cup rested in the holder. Still half full. Untouched. No sign of panic. No scattered belongings. Only quiet stillness. Too much stillness. Elian leaned slightly, careful not to disturb anything already recorded. Eyes tracing dashboard, steering wheel, faint reflections along the side mirror. There. Something small. Almost nothing. A thin line near the mirror housing. Not a crack. Not dust. Something placed with intention. Elian straightened slowly, breathing steady, heart calm. Yet inside, a familiar tension began to rise. The feeling that came when a case refused to remain simple. Behind them, the deputy spoke softly into a radio voice, blending with distant static. Far across the fields, a lone dog barked once, then silence returned. Night protected its secrets well. Corvin watched closely because he recognized this stillness. And it always meant the same truth. This was not an accident. Scene was arranged. Elian's voice barely rose above the wind. You sure? Corvin asked. No. A small pause followed. But I will be. The floodlight buzzed overhead, tiny insects circling despite the cold, drawn toward brightness they could not understand. Much like people drawn toward truth even when truth carried pain. Corvin looked down the empty road, stretching endlessly into darkness. If this was not a crash, then someone wanted it to look like one. Elian's gaze returned to the faint smear near the tire. The untouched coffee. The hidden mark beside the mirror. Pieces of a quiet story waiting patiently. Wind slipped colder through fabric and bone. Beyond the reach of white light, the rest of the truth remained unseen. For now. And as Elian stood in the silent center of the scene, one question settled deeper than the rest. If the road had not taken Leora Dane's life, then who had been standing here with her in the darkness? And why had they tried so carefully to disappear? Morning did not arrive suddenly. It crept slowly across the farmland in thin grey light that softened the hard edges of night. Frost covered the roadside grass like pale dust, and the abandoned sedan looked less mysterious in daylight, yet no more honest. Daylight often promised clarity. But some scenes kept their secrets even under the sun. Dr. Elian Vera stood near the ditch again hours later, holding a sealed evidence sleeve between steady fingers. Inside rested a nearly invisible scraping lifted from the faint smear beside the rear tire. Under ordinary eyes it meant nothing. Under magnification it might become a voice. Investigator Corvin Hale leaned against the patrol vehicle, sipping burnt coffee from a paper cup that had long since gone cold. Sleep had not visited anyone working the scene. Questions had stayed louder than fatigue. County forensics packed equipment in careful silence, while distant traffic finally began to pass along the highway. Normal life returning step by step, unaware of the quiet fracture left behind during the night. Corvin watched Elian without speaking for a long moment. "You always look calmer in daylight," he said finally. Elian did not look up. Daylight hides less. But people still do. Corvin let out a slow breath, almost like a quiet laugh that never fully formed. Family is asking already. They want to know if she suffered. A pause settled between them, carried by the cold air. Elian answered softly, "I do not think pain lasted long. It was the closest thing to comfort truth could offer. And even that felt small." Across the road, a tow truck prepared to lift the sedan from the ditch. Metal chains clinked gently against the frame, sounding too ordinary for the weight of the moment. When the car rose slowly from frozen soil, a darker patch appeared beneath where it had rested. Not fluid. Not shadow. Just disturbed earth. Elian's gaze fixed on it immediately. Corvin noticed. Something new. "Maybe," Elian replied. They walked closer, boots pressing into mud softened by weak sunlight. The ground showed shallow impressions partly hidden by frost. Not clear footprints. Not random either. Someone had stood here longer than an accident required. Corvin felt tension return to the shoulders. So she was not alone. Elian remained quiet, studying distance between Mark's angle of pressure, small broken stems in the grass. Tiny details forming silent patterns. Patterns told stories when words were missing. A county officer approached holding a plastic bag containing personal items recovered from the vehicle. Phone. Wallet. Keys. Everything ordinary. Everything present. No robbery. No sudden struggle. Corvin frowned. Nothing taken. Nothing scattered. Then why stage a crash? Elian looked toward the open highway stretching under pale sky. Because the truth was meant to look simple. Silence followed. Heavy but thoughtful. Back at the temporary command trailer, paperwork waited, phones rang softly, and radios murmured fragments of distant conversations. The world of procedure beginning to close around the mystery. Elian placed the evidence sleeve beneath a portable microscope unit powered by a humming generator. Light narrowed into a bright circle, revealing texture too small for human sight alone. Corvin watched from the doorway, arms folded. "You ever wish a case stayed simple?" he asked. Elian adjusted focus slowly. "Simple cases are the ones we misunderstand." Under magnification, the faint scraping transformed into layered particles. Paint fragments. Synthetic fiber. And something reflective like powdered glass, yet too uniform to belong to a broken window. Corvin stepped closer, curiosity replacing fatigue. "What am I looking at?" Elian spoke quietly. "Transfer residue. Not from this vehicle. Meaning, someone else was here. Close enough to leave a trace. Careful enough to take everything else." Corvin felt a chill unrelated to weather. Predetermined. Not random. Yes. Outside the trailer, morning brightened into full day. School buses moved along distant roads. Farm machinery started somewhere beyond sight. Life continuing without pause. Inside the small space, tension grew sharper. Corvin ran a hand across tired eyes. Background on Leora is clean. No debts. No threats. No recent arguments anyone admits to. Everyone says the same thing. Kind. Reliable. Quiet. Elian listened without interrupting. Because ordinary lives could still hide extraordinary intersections. People rarely see the moment danger enters their story. Elian said. Corvin nodded slowly. "You think she knew the person?" A long pause. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. And that certainty felt heavier than doubt. Afternoon light shifted warmer through the trailer window as hours passed in careful analysis. Each small discovery narrowing possibility while deepening mystery. Phone records showed one unanswered call shortly before the estimated time of death. Unknown number. Unregistered. Gone silent afterward. Wallet contained cash untouched. Identification undisturbed. Keys showed no damage. Meaning she had not tried to flee. Every detail suggested calm before interruption. Corvin stared at the evidence board forming piece by piece. This feels planned long before last night. Elian agreed with a slight movement. Preparation leaves patterns. We just have not seen the first one yet. Outside wind carried the distant sound of children laughing from a school playground miles away. A reminder of the life Leora had lived only yesterday. Corvin looked toward the sound, then back to Elian. You ever think about how fast everything changes? Elian answered after a moment. Change is rarely fast. We just notice it late. Evening approached again, painting the sky in faded orange and blue. Another day ending without resolution. Fatigue pressed heavier now, but neither of them stepped away. Because unanswered truth had gravity. A lab technician entered quietly holding a preliminary toxicology note rushed from the regional center. Elian read it once. Then again slower. Corvin watched tension rise in silence. What is it? Elian placed the paper down carefully. Sedative traces. Low dose. Administered before death. Corvin felt the room narrow. She was drugged. Yes. Not enough to alarm immediately. Enough to slow reaction. Enough to control. Anger moved across Corvin's face, sharp and visible. So she trusted someone. Got close enough. Elian did not answer. Because the evidence already had. Outside, the last light of day faded into deepening blue, mirroring the return of uncertainty. Corvin paced once across the narrow trailer. We are missing something obvious. Something right in front of us. Elian looked again at the microscope image frozen in silent brightness. Yes. A whisper of realization hovered just beyond reach. Close. But not clear. Night settled for the second time since Leora Dane had left the school fundraiser, smiling at familiar faces, unaware of the ending already moving toward her. Inside the quiet trailer filled with paperlight and unanswered questions, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was never about the road. Never about an accident. Never about chance. Someone had planned this moment with patience. And patience meant history. Elian finally spoke the thought forming all day. To understand why she died. We have to understand where her last real choice happened. Corvin stopped pacing. You mean before she ever got in the car? Yes. Silence followed. But this time it carried direction. Because somewhere in the ordinary hours before darkness, a single decision, a single meeting, a single conversation, had quietly rewritten the future. And until they found that hidden moment, the truth would remain just out of reach. Waiting. Watching. Unfinished. Night returned with a colder edge than before. Clouds covered the sky and removed even the small comfort of distant stars. The highway looked emptier than it had the previous evening. As if the land itself understood something was wrong. Inside, the county command trailer soft electric light hummed over scattered reports, photographs and sealed evidence leaves. Every surface carried the quiet pressure of unfinished truth. Dr. Elian Vera remained seated at the narrow workstation, eyes steady on the illuminated microscope field. Hours had passed without real movement. Only small adjustments of focus. Small breaths. Small thoughts connecting into larger patterns. Investigator Corvin Hale stood near the doorway, speaking in low tones with a deputy before finally stepping back inside. The door closed with a muted click that sounded louder than it should. Background checks came through. Corvin said quietly. Elian did not look away from the lens. And nothing obvious. No enemies. No financial trouble. No hidden history anyone can find. Silence filled the space again. Ordinary lives sometimes required extraordinary lies to stay ordinary. Elian murmured. Corvin leaned against the wall, arms folded tight. You still think she knew the person? Yes. The certainty remained unchanged. And certainty without explanation felt dangerous. Corvin studied the evidence board again. Photographs of the roadside. The abandoned sedan. Personal items arranged in careful order. A timeline drawn in thin marker lines that stopped suddenly at the moment everything ended. One missing piece could hold the entire answer. But missing pieces rarely revealed themselves willingly. The lab technician entered once more carrying a small insulated container. Breath visible in the cold air that slipped inside with the opening door. Additional trace results. Rushed priority. Elian finally lifted gaze. Not fast, but focused. The container opened with a soft snap. Inside rested a second slide prepared from residue collected beneath Leora's fingernails during autopsy. Corvin felt tension sharpen instantly. She fought. Maybe not violently, Elian said. But she reached for something. The slide settled under the microscope. Light narrowed. Focus turned. For several long seconds nothing changed. Then Elian's posture shifted almost invisibly. A sign Corvin had learned to recognize. What? Corvin asked. Not skin. Not fabric. Elian whispered. The image revealed microscopic metallic particles embedded within clear polymer dust. Engineered material. Manufactured. Precise. From the car. Corvin guessed. No. The single word landed heavy. Then from where? Elian adjusted magnification higher. Industrial composite. Used in specialized equipment. Not common consumer material. Corvin's mind moved quickly through possibilities. Construction. Machinery. Medical devices. Maybe. Elian said. But look at the bonding pattern. A pores stretched tight. Designed for optical stability. Corvin frowned. Meaning? Elian leaned back slowly. Eyes distant for the first time that night. Microscope housing. High-precision instrument. The irony settled between them like cold air. A microscope. Yes. Silence followed deeper than before. Because this was no longer only a roadside mystery. It pointed somewhere specific. Somewhere controlled. Somewhere connected to knowledge. Corvin straightened. You think she met someone who works with lab equipment? I think. Elian said carefully. She touched something she was never meant to touch. Outside wind pressed harder against the trailer walls. A low restless sound. Inside realization began forming a new direction. School fundraiser. Corvin said slowly. Teachers. Parents. Volunteers. Anyone connected to science programs. Labs. Grants. Elian nodded once. Find who brought specialized equipment into her world. The investigation shifted in that moment. From open farmland. To human networks. To hidden intersections between ordinary community life and controlled scientific spaces. Hours later the small middle school stood quiet under security lights. Hallways empty. Lockers closed. Bulletin boards still decorated with colorful student artwork untouched by tragedy. Corvin and Elian walked slowly through the corridor guided by a night custodian who kept voice low out of respect rather than rule. Fundraiser was in the gym. Custodian said. Science club display tables along the wall. The gym doors opened with a soft metallic echo. Inside the wide polished floor reflected overhead lights like still water. Tables remained folded near the stage. But one long row along the far wall still held equipment not yet packed away. Student microscopes. Display boards. Small experiment kits. Ordinary learning tools. Harmless. Simple. Elian moved closer step by careful step. Eyes scanning shapes, surfaces, labels. Then stopped. At the end of the row. Separate from the others. Rested a single high-grade optical microscope inside a padded transport case. Not school property. Too advanced. Too expensive. Corvin felt the same quiet recognition. This one does not belong here. No. Elian said. A small metal tag hung from the case handle. Institution name engraved in clean lettering. Virex Research Outreach Program. Corvin read it twice. Private lab partnership. Yes. Why bring something like this to a middle school fundraiser? Community engagement. Elian said softly. Or recruitment. Corvin looked closer at the microscope surface under flashlight beam. Tiny scratches near the adjustment ring. Barely visible. But real. Same composite material. He realized. Elian's silence confirmed it. She touched this. Meaning she stood here. Close to whoever brought it. And something happened after. Footsteps echoed faintly in the empty gym. Only their own. Yet the space felt watched by memory. Corvin's voice lowered. Who signed this in? Custodian thought for a moment. Young outreach coordinator. New face. Name sounded like Sereth Vale. The unfamiliar name hung in still air. Do we have contact? Corvin asked. Left early. Before cleanup finished. Custodian said. Seemed in a hurry. Elian closed eyes briefly. Patterns tightening. Planned presence. Planned exit. Corvin already reaching for phone. I will have dispatch locate employment records. But Elian spoke quietly before the call connected. Wait. Corvin paused. Why? Because. Elian said slowly. If this was planned, then disappearance was planned too. Silence deepened. Meaning. We may already be late. The gym felt colder suddenly despite steady heating vents. A place of learning turned into the first visible doorway of something darker. Corvin completed the call anyway, voice-tight controlled. Outside somewhere in the sleeping town a distant siren began to rise. Faint. Unrelated. Yet impossible to ignore. Elian looked once more at the advanced microscope resting alone under bright school lights. A tool meant to reveal hidden truth. Now pointing toward a hidden lie. And one realization settled with quiet certainty. Leora Dane had not simply met the wrong person. She had discovered something. Something small enough to hide under magnification. Yet dangerous enough to kill for. The question was no longer only who, but what, and how far that truth was willing to reach before the night finally ended. Rain began just before dawn. Not heavy. Not violent. Only a slow steady fall that softened the edges of streets and rooftops across the quiet town. Water gathered along sidewalks and slid down dark windows of closed storefronts. Streetlights reflected in the thin surface of puddles like distant fading stars. Everything felt suspended. Waiting. Inside the county operations room the air carried the smell of damp coats and tired coffee. No one had gone home. Fatigue showed in silent movements and long pauses between words. Dr. Elian Vera stood near a narrow table covered in printed records pulled overnight from regional databases. Employment files. Grant approvals. Travel logs. Fragments of a life that had already begun dissolving. The outreach coordinator named Sereth Vale existed on paper. But only barely. Short-term contract. Temporary housing. No long employment history. No verifiable academic record beyond digital copies easy to fabricate. A person designed to appear real. Not to be known. Investigator Corvin Hale read the same page again, hoping new meaning might appear between identical lines. This is planned deeper than we thought. He said quietly. Elian did not answer immediately. Because the evidence had already said it. Outside thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the county line. Too distant to see. Close enough to hear. A technician hurried in carrying an evidence envelope sealed only minutes earlier. Traffic camera pull from the highway east of the crash site. Timestamp 30 minutes before estimated death. Corvin opened it fast. Inside rested a printed still frame and a digital drive. The image showed Leora's sedan traveling alone in weak roadside light. But another shape followed behind. Headlights off. Distance carefully measured. Corvin felt anger rise sharp and immediate. She was being watched. Elian studied the spacing between vehicles. Not emotion. Only pattern. Yes. And not for the first time. You think this started before last night? Corvin asked. Elian nodded slightly. Preparation leaves repetition. Rain tapped softly against the windows like quiet counting. The video loaded onto a small monitor. Grainy motion. Dark road. Two vehicles moving through empty farmland. Then, at a curve in the highway, the second vehicle accelerated. Closed distance. Lights still dark. Seconds later, both disappeared beyond camera range. No collision visible. No sudden movement. Just disappearance into unrecorded darkness. Corvin whispered. Everything important happened when no one could see. Elian's gaze stayed fixed on the frozen final frame. Not no one. A pause. Who? Corvin asked. Elian looked down at the evidence list. At the microscopic composite particles. At the advanced microscope in the school gym. At the sedative traces. Someone who controls what is seen. And what is not. Silence followed. Heavy with implication. Morning light slowly replaced the storm clouds with a pale grey sky. Rain weakened to mist. But tension inside the room only tightened. Another report arrived. Vehicle registry search from partial frame analysis. Possible match found. A dark utility van registered to a mobile diagnostics contractor. Recently dissolved. Ownership transferred twice in 6 months. Current listed operator. Sereth Vale. Corvin's jaw set hard. So the name is real enough to hold a driver's license. But nothing else. Elian spoke softly. Identity built for movement. Not permanence. Where is the van now? Corvin asked. Last toll record. 2 hours after the crash. Heading west towards state line. Too clean. Too fast. Corvin paced once across the room, energy rising again. We are chasing someone already gone. Maybe. Elian said. But disappearance also leaves patterns. Corvin stopped. Explain. People who erase themselves still carry purpose. They go somewhere specific. Not nowhere. The words settled slowly, turning frustration into direction. Why kill her? Corvin asked. Because she saw something. Elian replied. Not just the microscope. Corvin said. No. Something inside the work connected to it. Rain finally stopped. Clouds breaking apart into thin drifting pieces. Sunlight trying carefully to return. A quiet officer entered carrying a small personal item recovered late from the school gym storage bin. Missed during first sweep. A folded student flyer. Science club presentation schedule. One name circled in blue ink. Not Sereth Vale. Not Leora Dane. Another student presenter. Absent the night of the fundraiser. Reported sick. Corvin read the name slowly. Tamsin Rook. Elian felt a subtle shift in the air. Like a door opening somewhere unseen. Why circle a student? Corvin asked. Elian answered almost in a whisper. Because the student saw something first. Silence deepened again. But now it carried clarity instead of confusion. Where is the student now? Corvin said quickly. Home. According to school absence record. Corvin already reaching for keys. Let's go. The drive across town felt longer than distance allowed. Wet roads. Quiet neighborhoods. Morning beginning for people unaware how close truth had been sleeping beside them. They stopped in front of a small narrow house with peeling paint and a porch crowded by old flower pots. Ordinary. Unprotected. Corvin knocked gently. Not wanting fear. Only answers. After a moment the door opened just enough to reveal tired, worried eyes belonging to a guardian who had not slept. We already told the school. The voice said softly. Tamsin is sick. Elian stepped forward slightly. Voice calm. Careful. We are not here about school attendance. We need to ask about something Tamsin may have seen. Fear moved across the guardian's face like a shadow passing sunlight. A long pause. Then the door opened wider. Inside the house smelled faintly of medicine and warm tea. Curtains half closed against the grey morning. A small figure sat on a couch wrapped in a blanket. Eyes alert despite illness. Watching strangers with quiet understanding beyond childhood. Elian lowered voice gently. You brought a science project to the fundraiser. Yes. A slow nod. Did someone talk to you about it? Another nod. More hesitant. Can you tell us who? Silence stretched thin. Fragile. Then the child spoke a single sentence barely louder than breath. They told me not to look inside the lens. The room felt suddenly colder. Corvin exchanged a glance with Elian. Both understanding at once. What did you see? Elian asked softly. The answer came slow. Careful. Honest. Something moving. Where nothing should move. Silence followed. deeper than any before, because the truth was no longer only about a staged crash, or a false identity, or even a single death. It was about discovery, accidental, dangerous, unintended, and someone willing to erase anyone who saw too much. Elian felt certainty settle fully for the first time. This was never meant to stay inside a school gym. Corvin's voice lowered. What was she working on? Elian looked toward the quiet child, then toward the rain-washed morning outside. Something small enough to hide under glass, but powerful enough to make silence worth killing for. The final path toward truth had opened, and there was no turning away now. Morning light felt different after leaving the small house. Not brighter, not warmer, only sharper, as if the world itself had shifted slightly out of place. Rain clouds drifted apart above the quiet streets and thin sunlight spread across rooftops still wet from a storm. Everything looked ordinary again. Cars passing, neighbors walking dogs, a delivery truck stopping 2 houses down. Ordinary life continuing without knowing how close something hidden had come to the surface. Inside, the county vehicle silence held steady between Dr. Elian Vera and investigator Corvin Hale. Not the silence of confusion anymore. The silence of understanding forming too quickly to ignore. A child had seen movement where nothing should move. Inside a lens designed to reveal the invisible. Inside equipment brought by a stranger who barely existed. Corvin finally spoke. If that microscope showed something real, then this was never about one person. Elian answered quietly. No. It was about control. Control over discovery. Control over knowledge. Control over who was allowed to see. The vehicle slowed at an empty intersection where a red light glowed against wet pavement. No other cars waited. No sound except the soft ticking of the engine. Corvin looked at Elian. You already know where this ends, do not you? A long pause. Yes. The light turned green. But neither of them moved for a second longer. Because knowing the ending meant accepting what came after. Hours later, the advanced microscope from the school gym stood inside a secured forensic laboratory. Clean white walls. Filtered air. No outside noise. The machine looked harmless. Almost elegant. Polished metal. Clear glass. Precision built for learning and research. Yet one hidden truth had already followed it here. Elian adjusted the focus controls slowly with steady hands. Every movement careful. Every breath measured. Corvin watched from behind the glass partition required for safety. Not fully understanding the science, but understanding the weight. What are we looking for? He asked through the intercom. Elian's voice came calm. Not what. Why? The prepared slide from the microscope surface settled into place. Light passed upward. Magnification increased. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Only expected microscopic dust. Fibers. Tiny scratches. Then, movement. Not illusion. Not reflection. Movement where nothing living should exist. Corvin felt his chest tighten even from across the room. Is that real? Yes. Elian said softly. A synthetic microstructure. Self-organizing. The words sounded impossible even in a laboratory built for impossible things. Corvin struggled to follow. You mean someone created this? Yes. For what purpose? Elian watched the slow-shifting pattern beneath the lens. Adaptive material. Medical repair. Environmental cleanup. Any number of breakthroughs. Then a pause. Or surveillance. Control. Weaponization. Silence pressed hard against the glass. Because discovery is never dangerous by itself. Only the intention behind it. Corvin spoke quietly. And Leora saw this. Yes. She understood enough to ask questions. Enough to become a risk. The moving structure continued its silent pattern. Unaware of death already connected to its existence. Corvin's voice lowered. So Sereth Vale was sent to retrieve the research. Or erase witnesses. Elian said. Both can happen at the same time. Another long silence followed. Then Corvin asked the question waiting beneath everything. Can it be stopped? Elian looked at the fragile motion under magnification. Yes. But stopping knowledge never ends the story. It only hides it again. Footsteps approached outside the lab. Multiple voices. Official tone. Federal authority had arrived sooner than expected. Corvin closed his eyes briefly. Of course they did. Because secrets connected to power never stay local for long. The laboratory door opened and suited figures entered carrying calm expressions practiced over many years. Polite. Controlled. Certain. One of them spoke with measured respect. Dr. Vera. Investigator Hale. We will take jurisdiction from here. Not a request. A conclusion. Corvin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Because some battles cannot be fought directly. Elian remained still at the microscope. What happens to the evidence? Elian asked. It will be secured. Reviewed. Classified if necessary. Safe words. Empty meaning. Elian understood. And the truth? Elian asked softly. The suited figure paused only slightly. The public truth will remain unchanged. A tragic accident. Silence filled the sterile room. Because sometimes the final mystery is not what happened, but what will be allowed to be known. Corvin looked toward Elian, waiting for anger. Protest. Anything. None came. Only stillness. The same stillness that had stood beside a quiet highway 2 nights earlier. Elian carefully removed the slide from the microscope. Sealed it. Labeled it. Small actions. Precise. Final. Then stepped back. If knowledge survives. Elian said quietly. Truth eventually follows. The suited figure offered no reply. Evening returned slowly across the county. Soft gold light over farmland. Long shadows across empty road. The crash site looked ordinary again. No tape. No lights. No sign that anything had ever happened. Wind moved gently through dry grass, carrying the same quiet whisper as before. Elian stood at the roadside alone. Hands in coat pockets. Watching distance. Not waiting. Not searching. Only remembering. Some cases end with answers. Some end with silence. Both leave marks that do not fade. Footsteps approached softly on gravel. Corvin stopped beside Elian. No urgency left in posture. They are closing everything. He said. I know. Official report tomorrow. Yes. A long quiet moment passed between them. Do you ever get used to this? Corvin asked. Elian looked toward the fading horizon. No. Another pause. Does it ever feel worth it? Elian answered after the wind moved once more through the fields. Truth is not measured by outcome, only by whether someone was willing to see it. The sun lowered further. Light turning amber. Then thin. Somewhere far away a truck engine echoed across open land. Fading slowly. Corvin nodded once. What will you do now? Elian's gaze remained on the road stretching into distance. Listen for the next whisper. Because there is always another. Corvin said. Yes. Night began to return. Gentle. Unstoppable. Before leaving, Elian looked once more at the place where the sedan had rested. At the invisible line between accident and intention. Silence and truth. Loss and memory. Leora Dane's story would be written differently in official records. Shorter. Simpler. Easier to forget. But not completely lost. Because someone had listened. Someone had seen. Someone would remember. And sometimes. That is the only victory truth is allowed. Corvin walked back toward the vehicle but stopped after a few steps. One last question. He said. Elian waited. If that experiment had never been discovered, would any of this have happened? The wind carried a long quiet pause before the answer came. Discovery does not create danger. It reveals what was already willing to exist. Corvin absorbed the words slowly. Then nodded. They drove away without sirens. Without urgency. Just 2 figures leaving an empty road behind. The highway returned to silence. Grass moving softly under the night wind. No sign of the hidden evidence. No sign of the rewritten crime scene. Only darkness. And the quiet question that remains whenever truth is buried instead of spoken. How many secrets are still waiting, just beyond what we are allowed to see?